What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. Something which is very obvious with games like the First Descendant and looter shooters in general is that there's often activities inside these games that you will be repeating for hours on end, looking for the perfect piece of gear to drop or a specific item to drop or something like that. And what is very clear from the type of content that I make for these kinds of games that I support is that I'm always trying to find efficient ways to do these activities, these repetitive activities, in the best way possible that either gets you the most chances at whatever you're trying to get, or basically streamlines the process to a way where you're getting multiple different kinds of resources in at the same time, thereby double, triple, quadruple dipping and rewarding you for that. But basically the bottom line with this video that I'm making today is a question that I oftentimes get on my Discord, on my streams, and also on my videos, and that is the importance of having a farming set in the game and how big a difference it really actually makes. So first things first, what do I mean when I say a farming set? So of course on every Descendant you can equip 4 pieces of external components, the different kind in each slot. So in the first slot we have auxiliary power units, in the second slot we have a sensor, in the third slot we have a memory, and in the fourth slot we have a processor. So you can equip one of each kind, so you can't equip like 4 processors or something like that. And these different pieces of external component all roll their substats essentially from a pool that is unique to that specific kind of component. So auxiliary power units have a pool that they roll from, and sensors have a pool that they roll from, and you can actually quite easily map these out. There aren't that many of them, but basically if you're looking at this table over here, in the first row we have auxiliary power and all of the possible things that can roll on it, and then so on and so forth for the sensor, the memory, and the processor. Now basically the point is that they will either roll HP, defense, or shield as their main stat. So that's the amount at the top. If we just quickly go back here, you'll see this one rolled max shield, for example, on top of this auxiliary power. And then these here, so maybe I can just color them a different color. These ones are random, and this can be different things that roll depending on which of these external components you're looking for. I'll give you an example. Like for instance on auxiliary power, you can roll max HP, you can roll fire resistance. This is important. Your resistances, for example, roll a different resistance on each one of the components, so you could roll that on each component and give yourself a fair bit of resistance to each and every element, basically from each component. But then you have some other interesting ones, like for example on the auxiliary power unit you have module drop rate and Kuiper drop rate that can roll. Now these two are what you would consider farming stats, right? Because basically increasing the amount of modules that drop when you kill stuff, that increases the yield that you get from farming, as does Kuiper, which is one of the 2 currencies alongside gold in the game. And then of course we have MP, recovery out of combat, and down but not out duration, which is that state that you go into when you basically get killed. So some of these things are far more useful than others. I mean DBNO duration is, there's definitely better stuff to roll than that. But then again, some are really useful. Like for example, a sensor, a good sensor with something like max MP and MP recovery in combat can be super useful to like a Lepic, for example, that is trying to maximize the amount of shots that he can get out with an overkill. But continuing on the trend here, each one of these 4 external components can roll 2 rolls on them that are really good for farming. In the case of the sensor, that would be consumable drop rate over here and character XP gain. I think character XP gain is pretty self-explanatory. Consumable drop rate is really interesting because this increases the chance of consumables dropping in the game. And of course, consumables include the lovely breakers that you need to be able to open up caches that you'd probably be using with Enzo to try and farm some of his, Transcendent mods and all of that, and get a lot of Kuiper and the planetary materials and so on. So these are also consumables, and having that stat on your gear can actually increase the chance of these dropping more. But getting back to our list over here, then on the memory itself we have gold drop rate, which is also a farming stat for us. Firearm proficiency gain is another one. This is going to allow you to accumulate proficiency on your weapons faster, very much the same as we get character XP gain for just your actual Descendant. And then last but not least, on your processor you can have equipment drop rate. Equipment being things like external components and reactors and stuff like that, whereas module drop rate is specifically related to, for example, the modules that your Descendant uses and the modules that you put on weapons. So basically then we have one other one that we can discuss here, which is also good for farming, and that is item acquisition distance. Now, considering that this is a looter shooter, the distance from which you can pick stuff up off the ground is not great at all. And so therefore, any kind of like, increase that you can give yourself to this is super, super helpful. And having this on your gear actually means that you don't have to be running directly over Kuiper or gold to pick it up, and you can actually run next to it and it'll pick it up, and that's pretty damn useful, I'm not gonna lie. So knowing everything that we saw on that right now, the perfect setup for us for a farming set would basically then be a auxiliary power with Kuiper shard and module drop rate increase on it, a sensor with consumable drop rate increase modifier on it and character XP gain modifier, a memory with firearm proficiency gain and gold drop rate increase modifier, and last but certainly not least, a processor with item acquisition distance and equipment drop rate. That is a combination of all of the different roles that basically increase the yield of you performing activities in the game, killing enemies, and then potentially dropping stuff for you or giving you XP, gold, Kuiper, proficiency, and so on. Now, to answer the question about whether it is worth it to get yourself a set like this that basically increases your yield, and how much is that increase really, because as you can see, if we go back here quickly, we can see that the increases is not insane. It's like 0.16x Kuiper shard drop rate increase. So really, how much does that actually mean, and is it worth it for you to get? Now, I've got some numbers that we can look at, but I just quickly want to explain exactly how I did this. So of course, I did a whole bunch of farming with specifically this set equipped, and then I did, to counter that, I unequipped these 4 items and just equipped like a set, like the Slayer set or something like that, which was just basically giving me additional things like chill resistance and MP recovery in combat and all of that, and none of these plus stats for farming in them to muddle up the results. And what was super important to me is that we do the exact same activity and the exact same repetition, so our test case is the same. So I settled on basically just running a shitload of sterile land. This over here, anticipated ambush point. It's a short little mission that you can do, and it has a fairly high yield of pretty much everything. There are some tough enemy, not tough, but enemies in there that spawn that can basically drop some of those breaker keys and all that sort of thing. And you also have a boss at the end of it, which also has like a loot pool that can sometimes drop like better modules and that sort of thing. So I felt like this was a good mission to essentially do this. And basically what I did is I ran this over multiple times to establish a baseline and to basically compare the 2 different kinds to each other. All of this then gives us some numbers that we can look at. And firstly, I want to mention that basically what you're looking at the top here is an hour's worth of effort. I did multiple hours to establish a baseline, as I said, to create an average on both sides, with the gear and without the gear. But the idea is to compare 1 hour of farming with the gear versus 1 hour of farming without. And it's not uniform across the way in terms of like what it increases. But first of all the things that I tested for was I tested for XP, weapon proficiency, gold, Kuiper, modules. This can be modules for your Descendant as well as modules for your weapon. Consumables, like for example the breakers, and then equipment, meaning this is actually reactors and weapons and components, external components, basically everything that drop. So the point is that, first of all, obviously, I think it goes without saying, but wearing the gear is more beneficial, right? So we are seeing more of these things dropping. But specifically in an hour, you're seeing about 275k of additional XP for your character that's dropping, which is about a 30% increase. With weapon proficiency, we're seeing about a 240k, which is 34% increase. With gold, we're seeing about 422k, which is like a 9% increase. Kuiper is 52k, which is like a 26% increase. Modules is 84 more modules, which is like a 40% increase almost. Consumables, it's basically double, so that's like a 100% increase. And then last but certainly not least, equipments, meaning reactors, weapons, and components, we're seeing like a 14% increase. This one's also really important because a lot of the time you'll actually be dismantling these things. So yes, you are looking for perfect reactors, but for example with weapons, you're actually dismantling those because you need those components for doing specific research, for example, for things that allow you to reroll the stats on your guns and all that stuff. So it's really good to also just be able to get a shitload more of that. Now, this might not seem like a lot for an hour, and I can fully understand that somebody might look at this and go, well, shit, I mean, that's not that fucking much, and like it's just an hour, so whatever. But like, this obviously increases when you stretch it over time. And let's say your average time that you play the game every night is for 3 hours, and you play like, you know, let's say 3 times a week, and so you're doing 9 hours of playing, and let's say all of that time is spent grinding reactors and all that stuff because you're looking for the perfect reactor roll, or you're trying to level your characters or something like that, then just in a span of a 3-hour session, you'll realize how much shit you're leaving on the ground, how much you're not actually getting by having a set like this. So while I would never tell someone, hey, this is absolutely fucking necessary and you can't play the game without getting yourself a farming set, it is absolutely clear that it is a pretty big advantage to have something like this. And over the space of time, especially when you start thinking about 5, 10, 15, 20 hours, which is very easy to happen in a game like this, understand something: these looter shooter games are built by design to have you playing them and be on this hamster wheel the entire time, looking for the perfect gear to drop, or just one more level, or I just want to reset my character one more time with a catalyst or something like that. So that's the point. So you can absolutely give yourself an advantage and give yourself the ability to have more resources, more XP, more gold, more Kuiper by actually actively looking and trying to build yourself something like this. Now, of course, these rolls can also come in different qualities, right? So the point is they can roll blue, they can roll purple, and they can roll gold. So this can either take you a relatively long time to farm up something like this, or you can get super lucky like you could get with a reactor or anything like that with a perfect roll on, and you could get it right off the rip. The good news is this: very much like you can target farm reactors in the game, you can actually target farm these external components as well, and they also cycle weekly. So what I mean by that is, like we go in the game when, let's say, for example, we're trying to, oh, okay, cool, I've got Lepic, I want to get myself a Lepic reactor, so I'm going to go fire, I'm going to go tech. Okay, cool, holy shit, I can farm the classified area this week for general rounds, fire, tech, reactor, yee. So you could do the same thing when it comes to these components, and basically in this last cell here, you'll see you'll be able to select them. So auxiliary power, sensor, memory, and processor. And generally speaking, every week has 2 of these available to be farmed. At least ever since I've been taking note of this, that has been the case. But basically you can choose auxiliary power, and you can see, okay, cool, if I go kill and do missions inside the observatory area, then instead of the regular drop being reactors from these enemies, it will now drop a lot of these auxiliary power units. So that can be something that you can farm this week. Likewise, the same thing is true. You can see sensor should also be farmable this week in our Ironworks area and Sterile Land. And then of course that means that the other 2 are not going to be available this week. Memory, there's nothing for us, and processor, there's nothing for us. However, I do also want to mention that pretty much all of my components, and I've had multiple different sets of these because, again, the number ranges can also change, so you can get a better golden version of one that you already have. So always be on the lookout for that. Don't just assume, hey, shit, I've got a golden one with 2 gold stats on it, it's good. It can actually roll up. It can be better, so always check those values. I have found all of this just randomly out in the wild while I was looking for other stuff. So I have not spent a single second target farming this, so I can't basically tell you how successful target farming this will be. I can assume it's going to be just as frustrating as doing like a reactor farm, so you know, you'll get a good reactor when you're not looking for it. But that's basically the point, and this video is already stretching a little bit longer, but as you can tell, this is a topic that I'm passionate about. So yeah, but that's everything about external components, what a farming set is. I hope I kind of like shed some light on whether it is something that you should be spending some time on. I think my final TLDR on this would be that if the First Descendant is a game that you imagined yourself playing for quite a while still, and you're going to be leveling multiple Descendants and multiple guns, and you're going to be looking for all the stuff in the game and everything like that, and you want to get huge amounts of Kuiper and huge amounts of gold and things like that, then absolutely go on and get yourself something like this. And that's the video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments down below if you've built yourself a set like this, or if you're gonna think about doing that right now. I wish you luck. I hope you get all the pieces as soon as possible so you can make that grind and that farm just a little bit more bearable. Other than that, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Till next video, fucking cheers.